This is Up for Debate presents Shaken, Not Stirred, 6 Decades of James Bond in Film. Tonight, episode number 145, recorded May 2nd, 2019. Chapter 6, Pierce Brosnan in Golden Never Dies Enough, Another Day. Hello everybody and welcome to this continuing episode of Up for Debate presents I Am Shaun Jennings, joined as always by 008 himself, Matt Mariani.
008?
Does that mean you're better or worse than 007? Is it because it's like the DEF CONs where it's like I never remember if a high number is good or bad?
I mean, I would say I think the higher numbers are better. The only reason I'm saying that is 006. I don't think was as good an agent as 007. We introduced 00, but then again, Sean, you have 009, who was the clown from Octopussy, who
clearly
dies
sucked
in the opening scene, who was was an idiot. So maybe it is the lower number.
Are they just given out sequentially? So it's not that you're better or worse, you just came later?
Yeah, I think that's it. So 001, I guess, was maybe 000. 000 was the very first.
I feel like we should know this by now, considering how many of these damn movies we've watched.
Yeah, if we were better at our jobs, we would know these things.
Oh, Matt, I can't believe we're almost through this long nightmare.
Yeah, it seems like just an episode or two ago where you were like, we have so many of these movies left, but we're petering toward the end here all of a sudden.
Oh, slowly but surely, we're getting there. I mean, what's insane to me when I look at this run we've been going on is that since in the last month, it's literally been a little over a month, maybe a month and a half, we've watched 20 movies. 21 movies.
I stopped thinking of these as movies. I don't know why. Like, I guess it just became part of my routine. It just became like work. It's like, well, it's time to do my job and watch another Bond movie. But I didn't think of them as like new movies because I've seen them before. So it was more like homework, I guess. But
it feels like
homework.
One long TV series with really long episodes. Yes,
that is accurate. Yep. Yeah.
And Matt, we have got 4 excellent films we're going to be discussing this evening. If you haven't listened to any of the previous episodes, I don't know why you're here, but you should definitely go back, check out our previous 5 chapters. But tonight, we are talking Pierce Brosnan. Yes, everyone's favorite Bond of the 90s, and his 4 films, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. Matt, quite an era for Bond.
Yeah, this was a different era. This was the first Bond that came post-Cold War. Matter of fact, there was a lot of controversy, which I didn't know about. I had to, when I went back and did some research, I found out that there was a lot of controversy going on as to whether or not Bond should be brought back after the Cold War. I guess they felt like he was kind of a relic of the Cold War, and that he should basically just stay in that era. And since the Soviets were gone and the Soviet Union had crumbled, they didn't really think Bond had a place in this kind of modern era. What are your thoughts on that, Sean?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, they said the same thing coming out of the 60s with Sean Connery, and when George Lazenby took over the role for his film, the thought was Bond wouldn't survive into the 70s. He was a relic of the 60s. I think every time they've changed Bonds, after Pierce Brosnan, when they looked at Daniel Craig, they said a similar thing. Who can keep this franchise going? Does it still make sense? And I think that's what we're learning about the Bond films as we go through this series, is that the Bond films have to change with the times. The Timothy Dalton films of the 80s are different than the Roger Moore films of the 70s, are different than the Sean Connery of the 60s. I mean, we'll talk about Daniel Craig next week. I mean, those are really different movies. And so I think that's what's interesting about the Bond franchise is, you're right, I don't think, as it was in the 70s and 80s, it could have survived into the 90s. That's why these movies had to change.
Yeah, it is interesting that you bring up the Bond of the 70s changing. It was kind of the hippie era, the make love not war era,
live and let die era,
the live and let die era. The Spy Who Loved Me era. It totally called into question like the nature of Bond and who he was as a character. And was he really necessary? But for the first time, with this new Bond coming in, the Pierce Brosnan's debut in 1995. Uh, this is the longest hiatus that Bond had ever had to that point. 8 years. It had been 8 years since License to Kill, the previous Bond film. So,
long gap.
Yeah, really long gap. I think that people were starting to maybe forget about Bond, and they were they were already treating him as a vestige of the past, and not really. I don't think they really thought that it was even on the spectrum until it was announced that there would be another Bond film. How did GoldenEye do in the box office? Was it a relative success or?
It was a big success. $355 million at the box office. Considerably better than Timothy Dalton's films. It almost did twice what his films did.
Yeah, because License to Kill and especially I think that was the lowest grossing film, which was a shame. Really a shame, because it was a very good Bond movie. But
and we talked about that last week too. It opened up against really tough competition, and
yeah,
the box office really started to explode late '80s or into the '90s, and accounted for some record-breaking grosses, especially by the time we get to Die Another Day, which set quite a record as well. So, yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned GoldenEye, our first film of this evening, on a budget of $60 million. This 1995 film introduces Pierce Brosnan as the titular James Bond. I guess it's not really titular because his name's not in the title, but you get the idea.
A lot of interesting facts about GoldenEye.
There's a species of duck called GoldenEye.
Whoa, really?
Yes,
Is it named after the film, or?
Well, I was just about to say I actually don't know the answer. I know it literally has a golden eye. The duck.
Well, there you go.
I'll put
I would assume there'd be a
screen.
fish called a golden eye. That doesn't that sound like a type of fish? Like, I hooked a golden eye.
Oh, totally. But that sounds like a lot of animals too, because it could be like a lizard could be a golden eye, or a
golden-eyed lizard. Yeah.
A dinosaur.
Well, Shaun, I mean, viewers of the show, listeners of the show would be able to guess where the origin of the name of this film comes from.
Of course.
If you've been paying close enough attention, if you've been playing along at home, this comes from Ian Fleming's estate, the name of his estate in Jamaica, the GoldenEye estate. So this is the very first Bond movie that is written without any source material from Ian Fleming. This is a totally original Bond, 100% written, manufactured by other writers, other contributors. Although it does borrow heavily from previous Bond themes, like the Diamonds Are Forever, having the giant laser that shoots from space, the many different like disgruntled Soviet generals coming in, like you saw in I think starting with From Russia with Love, but also continuing with I want to say The Spy Who Loved Me had one, or maybe it was For Your Eyes Only.
I think it was For Your Eyes Only. It was
I think it was, right. Yes, and Moonraker. Several Bond movies had that, Soviet Union, the rogue Soviet general who's trying to just stir shit up, basically. First impressions, Shaun, of this movie. What were your first impressions of GoldenEye? When you first saw it, you saw that scene, Brosnan sneaking around first of all, he does that pretty awesome swan dive.
Oh, that's a great opening stunt.
Off the dam. Iconic. Absolutely iconic Bond moment.
Which, by the way, it is I'm trying to look up the exact height of the jump, but it is a 220-meter bungee jump. It was voted the best movie stunt of all time in some poll. It set the record for highest bungee jump off a fixed structure.
Wow.
And it was real. It wasn't Pierce. It was performed by Wayne Michaels. But it was, quite honestly, quite an impressive stunt. I think the opening is really good, where he has to break into the facility and stuff explodes really good. And we get introduced to Sean Bean's character.
Right.
The great Sean Bean, Alec Trevelyan.
Alec
006.
Trevelyan, 006. Yeah. Yeah, I thought he played it. He played an excellent counterpart to Bond. So this is where spoilers kick in, I guess. Trevelyan ends up betraying Bond
Now,
halfway through the film, and I have a couple of gripes with that. But you look like you have a question.
was it as obvious for everyone as it was for me that he was going to come back and be the bad guy?
It's hard to say, Sean. I really can't tell you because when I saw this movie, I was like 10 or 11, maybe.
Fair enough.
So I don't really know if I fully appreciated the big reveal in St. Petersburg Statue Park.
What's crazy to me is I'm just trying to think. I think 3 out of the 4 movies this evening has some sort of big reveal.
Yes. That was something that I noticed. Yeah.
I went back and I love watching and the audio clip that played at the beginning of the audio version of this show, the clips from the trailers, I like to play at the beginning of these. All 3 trailers of those movies spoil the twist.
Oh, no, really?
All 3 of them show Sean Bean being the bad guy. It shows Elektra King turning on Bond. It shows the Asian colonel there, Amun. It shows them all. It blows them in all.
Damn.
And I'm like, wait a second,
right,
that's the whole
rapid
movie.
succession. Yeah, I never noticed how big on twists this era of Bond was. Like the Brosnan Bond, there was like it was almost like an unwritten rule where they had to have a twist. Was there a twist in Tomorrow Never Dies?
That's what I was trying to think. I think
that might have been the only one.
It's a pretty straightforward movie.
It was, yeah. It's pretty paint by numbers.
But I think this one was my favorite twist, for reasons I will explain when we get into the other movies. But this one I was kind of like, this actually makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't really care for like where they're like, oh, it's really Alec's family history. That's why he's doing it. But I just like the idea of like a 00 agent fakes his death and he's really behind the whole thing. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. I back that up.
Yeah, it was believable. I bought it. I think that the only issue I have though here is if he's like, I guess it's not fully clarified if he decided to betray Bond in that like 5-year gap since the dam incident. Was it 5 years or 9 years, 8 years, 9 years?
Which, by the way, I made a note here. Is this the first time a Bond movie has used the blank years later gimmick?
Oh,
I couldn't think of a previous
believe so.
movie.
No, I genuinely think it is the first time jump.
And then they use it again in Die Another Day when he's kidnapped.
Yes, they do. That's true. Right. He's tortured for like 4 months. Yeah. So all right, something didn't really sit right with this rewatch here. So if 006, if Trevelyan set this up with Oramov, years prior, back when the damn mission was first going on, why didn't he just kill Bond initially?
See, I don't think.
A. Option B, though, if the betrayal happened in the interim years, then I guess you can go back to why didn't he just kill Bond in the Statue Park? But he just did what the Bond villain always does, which is like, let me reveal the master plan.
You literally can't kill Bond. It's impossible.
Yeah.
We've proven that.
But if this whole thing was, I mean, I assume he was in cahoots with Oramov the whole time, which is why they faked shooting him with in the dam situation. But in that case, he could have just killed Bond when he first saw him, like when they first met and they were in like the dark corridor.
But it wasn't.
He says something like,
but his evil plan wasn't to
or something.
My thought on that. So this is my theory. Okay, he was evil before the dam incident.
Mm-hmm.
However, Bond wasn't his target because Bond wasn't interfering with his evil plans. However, when Bond almost got him killed, quote unquote, faked his death, whatever, then he had to turn his attention to Bond because Bond was getting too close.
Okay.
I think if Bond had never gotten in his business, he would have been secretly 006 evil guy.
Yeah. So you think he still maintained like a level of respect for Bond, like professional respect or friendly respect?
I think so. I think that's why he didn't just straight up shoot him in that awesome statue graveyard.
Yeah. That could be. And, that's just the Bond villain way.
Oh, yeah, well, like I said, you literally cannot kill Bond. It is impossible.
So instead he shoots him with a tranquilizer dart and then puts him in a
in
helicopter.
a helicopter he can escape in. Come on. That was really frustrating. That was really dumb.
There are some not very smart moment, but there was something about framing them, like they were going to use the helicopter incident to frame them for something, and then Britain would be like humiliated. There was a big thing to it. Like,
I just thought of this. For the amount of times Bond has been framed or attempted to be framed for a crime, he could probably commit an actual crime and just say he was framed by a bad guy and get away with it.
I mean, clearly, because he's the most famous secret agent, even in his own universe. I mean, they do make a point over and over again of how people know his identity, know who he is and what he looks like.
Yep. Even
though he's a secret agent. Yeah, more problems, more meta problems, but in general, plot holes aside for now. I thought, what do you think of Brosnan as Bond?
Ooh, overall?
Yeah, opinions of just initial opinions of Brosnan as Bond. You can weigh him against earlier debuts.
Yeah,
Brosnan's debut,
and I thought it was good. I thought it was a good debut. I'm trying to think, comparing him to Roger Moore in Live and Let Die, not great.
No, I think we could probably agree. Will we agree that's the weakest Bond debut?
Oh, for
Roger
sure.
Moore,
for sure. And I'm not going to count George Lazenby because it was his debut and only movie, so I don't. His think
debut
that's
and
fair.
Finale, yes.
But yes, I agree. I think that's the weakest, and then I think Dr. No, Sean Connery was very good in, and I thought Living Daylights Timothy Dalton was good in. So, and Daniel Craig, I have seen Casino Royale, and I think he's pretty good in that. So I would say it's a solid entry. I think he establishes himself as Bond pretty quickly in this one. But one note I had that was really interesting as I was watching this movie was that it feels like Bond has no impact on the plot of this movie. Natalia drives so much of the plot, and Sean Bean drives so much of the plot, and I feel like Bond just keeps showing up at places.
Like he's just walking the audience through everything?
Yeah, basically. Like he just shows up because the script needs him to, not because he's driving the plot. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but what it, for me, created was a pacing problem in the film where there were long stretches where nothing interesting would happen, and then a ton of interesting stuff would happen. And it caused I thought the rhythm in this one wasn't great.
I mean, Bond is kind of like the muscle in this movie. He's like kind of bringing Natalia everywhere and like escorting her places.
She's
and
way more interesting.
Rescuing her from danger. Yeah.
Bond is like the fourth most interesting person in the movie.
Yeah, Natalia has the hacking skills. She's got the computer science skills, the programming skills. Bond, is really just the muscle here, keeping her protected and letting her do her job.
Basically,
much like the video game, much like the very popular, highly acclaimed GoldenEye for Nintendo 64.
I was waiting for when that was going to come
up. Well, if you had your money on 10 minutes in, you won the pool. So,
I want to talk about Natalia for a second, if we may.
Sure.
Isabella Scorrocopo, I don't think I said that right, survives the GoldenEye attack and ends up kicking ass and teaming up with James Bond throughout the movie. What did you think of Natalia in this, Matt?
I have interesting thoughts about, I guess about Natalia. It's the first time since Spy Who Loved Me where Bond pairs up with a quote unquote Russian girl.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I saw a lot of parallels between this movie and Spy Who Loved Me, I thought. In different ways. Like, I guess the relationship between Bond and Russia. I thought she was good. I thought Natalia was good. She was a little intense for the role. But I thought that was kind of refreshing. She definitely wasn't like your stereotypical like Bond girl from Diamonds Are Forever, where she's like tough at first, but then all of a sudden she's like like there's no point in the movie where she's like flimsy or ditzy
Dumb.
or dumb. Right. She's very, very smart.
Oh, sure.
Very good with computers. I think she was a very inspiring choice for Bond. Yeah, I thought she was good. I liked her. She was a little, she was a little white bread. She was a little like kind of boring.
Bland,
Yeah, kind of bland in a lot of ways. But I think she was solid. She was a solid choice. She had zero chemistry with Pierce Brosnan though, like none.
Yeah,
And I think
agree.
that's the problem with pretty much. Actually, there's going to be one that we're going to probably butt heads with, but this is the one that I don't really think she had a whole lot of natural chemistry with Pierce.
Are you indicating there's someone tonight who we're going to talk about with
there will
less
be.
chemistry?
No, with a lot more.
Okay.
And we're going to disagree on it. I just know it,
All
but
right.
we'll save that for later.
I'm excited for that. No, Natalia, look, I thought it was a good acting job. I mean, she does spend most of the movie screaming at explosions and running away from explosions. The issue I had, I'm glad that she got more involved in the plot. The issue I had is the movie, I think, let her character down in that I could not understand why I, as a viewer of the film, was supposed to care about her. Usually, the Bond girls, not always, but for the most part, have some reason for you to be like, I want this person to continue to live. I don't know why I'm supposed to care about her in this movie. She's working for the Russians, first of all, so she's technically a bad guy. I get that she didn't know what she was doing and she turns it around, but she was working on the weapon, knew it was a weapon. And that annoyed me, and I agree with you. There definitely was a chemistry issue. I did certainly like her better than Xenia Onatopp, who was
another hilariously named Bond villain.
Very weird, very odd, very upsetting. I thought way overplayed.
Xenia, more like Xenia over the top.
Hey, zing, you got him. Played by Famke Janssen, who played Jean Grey in the X-Men movies. I knew her from somewhere. And the mom in the Taken movies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it now. Yeah, she was out there. She was an out there villain. I actually kind of liked her. I liked her as a Bond villain. She was crazy. She was just pure chaos.
But there was nothing else in them. It was it was weird because it wasn't a zany movie. Like in a Roger Moore movie, I'd be like, okay, I get it. But this movie was super serious for the most part. I mean, this movie had, I think, the fewest Pierce Brosnan quips of any of the four.
Matter of fact, the only two that come to mind right off the bat. I know when he first meets Xenia, the no more foreplay.
Yeah.
And then there's also at the very end for England James, no for me. Right when he drops Trevelyan down in the cradle.
I just know it's got the fewest because I know Die Another Day, every line is a quip in that movie. When he and Halle Berry are quipping back and forth, it's upsetting.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. But
yeah.
Yeah, I can't really. Well, there's the part where he's in the car and Moneypenny is there and is that supposed to be Moneypenny or is that just some woman that's evaluating him?
I think it's a different woman.
It's a different woman?
Yes.
Yeah, they're driving in the car and doesn't he say something?
Carol.
He has the champagne. I'm sure there's some.
Oh, it's highly inappropriate, and then they start making out.
Oh, right. yes, that's it. Yep. Typical Bond. I actually really liked in this movie how a lot of Bond's bullshit has been circumvented because it's the 90s.
Yep.
The very first thing Moneypenny says to him is basically "You're gross. Stop doing this." I think she literally says, "I will call human resources because I think this is considered harassment."
Oh yeah. It's awesome. It's great. And we do have a new Moneypenny in this one, Samantha Bond, who sticks around for all four movies.
Yeah, Samantha Bond playing the new Moneypenny. I think she's all right. Yeah. She's all right. I like that her last name is Bond. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I wonder if that helped her or hurt her in getting the role.
Yeah. I bet it helped.
I would think.
I wrote in my notes, Bond's world has been updated. Samantha Bond as Moneypenny, Judi Dench as M.
Yes.
So we got our introduction of a new M, a female M. by the name of Judi Dench. She gets to say a whole lot of really like neat quips. She might have some of the best quips in the whole Brosnan stretch. I know she says in this one, like you're a dinosaur and you're gross or something like that. Like it's basically like
you're a relic.
You suck. Yeah. And she also says in Tomorrow Never Dies, probably the best thing that an M has ever said in a Bond franchise, when one of her top brass says to her, "No, with all due respect, ma'am, I don't think you have the balls for this job." And she says, "Well, perhaps that's true, but that means that I don't have to answer to them," or something like that. And I like that. That was a pretty neat. Or perhaps, yeah, that's true. But instead, I have my brain to answer to instead of them. Something. She's got some good quips in this stretch. It's funny. Yeah. I think that this is exactly what the Bond franchise needed at the time. It needed that little updated, and I think it was the best time to do that. 8 years since the previous one, an 8-year dry spell. So,
yeah, I mean, honestly, I could go on longer about this movie because there is a lot to talk about in it. We didn't even touch on the stunts, the great set pieces, that tank chase where he's just wrecking up the place, which was really exciting.
Yeah. So that part of that was filmed in a Hollywood set, but part of it was also filmed in St. Petersburg in Russia. It was the first time ever that Bond filmed segments in Russia, to my knowledge. And the people of St. Petersburg actually, like some of them, rumors were going around they were actually destroying parts of St. Petersburg to film the movie, which wasn't true. These were all sets built out of wood and plaster and stuff. But it was enough of a rumor that it definitely caused some controversy at the time.
That was awesome. I thought when the GoldenEye weapon attacks the base in Severnaya. Yes, that explodes real good. There are so many explosions in this movie.
Yeah,
which I am so on board with.
The train exploding.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Yep.
All the fighting scenes done at the satellite.
Oh, I think, in my opinion, I think that was the best fight scene since From Russia with Love. Certainly, the fight scene between Bond and Trevelyan on the satellite.
I would say it's the best really hand-to-hand fight, certainly.
Yes, I think it even beats From Russia with Love, but I think definitely since then, best hand-to-hand fight in a Bond scene.
And that Sean Bean death, so spectacular. He just falls all the way, splats, doesn't die. Then the satellite falls on top of him and crushes him.
Right.
Awesome.
And then, what do we think of Boris? Boris Grinchikov.
You know, you could put Alan Cummings in anything, and I would be 1,000,000% on board. I think he's great. And I think he's not particularly well used in this movie, but one thing I did note is the pen clicking scene with the exploding pen was very tense. Yes. And I thought it was really well done because in your mind, in the audience, you're counting the clicks, right? The movie doesn't really tell you whether or not it's going to go off. You have to keep track yourself, which I'm like, wait, was that 2? Was that 3? You're kind of looking at Bond for his reaction. Does he know? That was a really awesome scene. I like that a lot.
That was extremely well done. It reminded me of how the pen scene in Never Say Never Again failed miserably. Remember when the lady asks him to write a message on the paper?
I mean, it does work because she explodes.
Right, but I'm talking about the like what it should have been.
Right.
Like tense like that. Like I think everybody knew where they were going with that when she says write on this paper. But with the Boris scene, yeah, it was tense, and it was really good because you're like, oh, that's how they're gonna use the pen clicking. Like, yeah, it was good. It was good.
So, let's see. Quickly, I want to get to bad guy plan in this one.
Yeah,
Sean Bean steals the GoldenEye satellite. With he's going to hack into the British banks with Boris, steal all the money, then shoot off the GoldenEye satellite at London, completely erase all records so they can't prove he stole the money, while at the same time, as he puts it, he's going to send Great Britain back to the Stone Age.
So this is kind of, it reminds me of the plan from Fight Club.
Yes. That's exactly except I would say this one's much better.
Yes, the Fight Club one was stupid. Nobody really realizes how stupid it is because they give that movie too much credit. But this one was more thought out than the plan from Fight Club.
I think it's a good plan. I got to be honest. In terms of Bond villain plans, this one is like plausible, doable.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. As long as you have a space satellite that can shoot lasers from space.
But that's the thing I love about this is in a different Bond movie, Sean Bean would have built it from scratch out of nowhere. Like this was an existing weapons program from a government. He just stole it. So I'm like, all right, I'm sure the government has all kinds of crazy weapons we don't know about. So it's believable he could steal it. And an EMP from space is a plausible idea. Like that's a thing that could actually happen.
Yeah, I'll go on record in saying that this is the best villain plan of the night. I don't think any of the other Brosnan movies have as good a villain plan.
I'm going to challenge you on that.
Ooh, but World Is Not Enough. Is that the one you were thinking of?
No, but I guess that is.
Okay. All right. We'll then we might talk later then.
Oh, we're definitely going to talk. A certain media mogul may disagree with you.
Oh gosh.
We'll circle back. Let's see. I've got only a bunch of other small notes. I take
it back. This is the second. This is officially the second, in my opinion, the second best villain plan after World Is Not Enough. Spoiler alert. That, to me, I thought that was a great villain plan. We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, GoldenEye, activating the satellite, bringing Britain back to the Stone Age. It's an interesting plan. It's original. I think they take the Diamonds Are Forever plan and kind of update it with the getting the debt and stuff like that. And I could see the villain's like attachment to this, and you could realistically see someone like plotting their revenge. Like his family was murdered because the British government basically betrayed them, like as Leon's Cossacks, and so they were murdered by the Nazis because of that. And he had a vendetta against Britain from a young age. So I guess he really was planning to betray them all along. In which case, I go back to the beginning with why didn't they just kill Bond in the facility? But
yeah, I don't know. Maybe that would have been suspicious and tipped his plan. I think it's look. All of tonight's movies, including one in particular, very plot holy. So I'm going to try not to look too much into it, at least until we get to another one. I do want to mention the theme song GoldenEye, written by Bono and The Edge, performed by Tina Turner. I thought it was a fine song.
I think it was a little boring in terms of Bond songs. It was a good song, but it was very, very. I don't know.
I did like the opening sequence.
I wasn't my favorite. Opening sequence was all right. It was all right. Yeah.
Let's see. What else?
It was definitely. I like how these newer Bond movies, the opening sequence usually has to do with a theme throughout the movie instead of just like half-naked women dancing.
Right.
It's like it kind of ties into the plot. Like World Is Not Enough. You have the women dripping with oil, like they're made of oil, and you have the This one, you have like allusions to the laser and the fire coming from the satellite and stuff.
And they're literally hammering the sickles.
That's right. Yeah, it kind of is symbolizing the fall of the Soviet Union with the statues crumbling and stuff like that. I like the themes of this opening sequence, but the song itself wasn't really my favorite. But
yes.
One more quick thing about this movie. Joe Don Baker.
Yes.
Okay. How about that? He reappears. Now when I watched was it The Living Daylights? It was License to Kill. Yeah. I felt like he was the same person, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I had to go in and confirm that yes, this is the same guy, except this time he plays an American agent who is there to help Bond, named Jimmy. No, is he Jimmy? What was his name?
Man. First of all, before we get to that, I apologize. It was The Living Daylights. He played Brad Whitaker, the arms dealer, in that one.
Right.
And he's back as Jack Wade
Jack Wade,
And
right.
he does my favorite
and
thing.
he calls Bond Jimmy all the time.
Jimbo. Hey,
Jimbo.
Jimbo.
Yeah. Hey,
He's
Jimbo.
so funny. I love him in this, and his return in the later films as well.
Yeah. Yeah, he's much more tolerable than the racist cop from Live and Let Die.
Yeah, he's
much
actually
better.
fun.
Yeah. I actually look forward to him, and I don't cringe at all when he's on the screen. So we're introduced to Valentin Zukovsky, who gets a reprising role in World Is Not Enough. Bond's former KGB agent friend. I like that. I like that Bond has a KGB agent friend because, they're both in the same business. They may work for different companies, but, they can talk shop and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good actor, too.
Yeah. Valentin is not so warm and friendly to Bond at first because they have a history of Bond shooting him in the leg or in the knee, and I like that. I really genuinely like that they have a backstory and a beef in the past, but that they can respect each other as colleagues now that the Cold War is over.
Now that the role of Zukovsky is played by Robbie Coltrane.
Yes,
Do
Robbie
you know
Coltrane.
what other major character he plays in another major film franchise?
I've definitely heard the name before now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's a certain half giant.
Oh, he's Hagrid?
He's
Is
Hagrid.
He
He's
in
Hagrid.
the Harry Potter movie.
Yes, he is.
Okay, that's where he looked familiar. Okay, yeah, I could tell by his face. Yeah, okay, so he's a good actor.
Oh, he's
He can
great.
do all those accents. Yeah,
Like I said, all these guys are really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I'm a
Yeah.
big fan.
Really, a lot of famous actors here. Okay.
We got to move on, but just a couple quick hits. I thought the score to this was terrible. It jumped all over the place. It had different tones in different places. It was really inappropriate. I didn't think it was great.
Yeah, there was a new composer for this one, if I remember correctly, and I think this was the only one that he did. And also, I don't think the Bond theme was utilized enough at all. I mean, really, it was the only time I remember it being used is the scene with the tank when the tank comes out.
I felt like they got away from it in this one. New Bond, new decade. I also thought the film was visually dark. I think some of that was because it was set in Russia for so much of it, but it didn't seem as bright as some of the other Bond films. I thought that was just interesting to note.
It brightened up at the end.
It did.
The scenes with Cuba were very, very bright, of course. But yeah, I think you're right about that. It was very visually dark.
And my last note is from the beginning opening scene after he does the dam dive and he breaks into the facility. What bathroom has giant air vent gates right above the toilet?
Ones in the Soviet Union.
Could you imagine,
only ones in top secret facilities, Shaun.
Could you imagine going into a bathroom stall, sitting on a toilet, and you look up, and there is a giant air vent grate you can look up into right above you?
Right, one that's like partially open.
I know there are like plot holes and issues with these films, but that in particular very much bothered me.
How about that the guy that's on the toilet doesn't hear him?
Oh yeah, and he's just
immediately
kind of
above
down.
him. You don't
he
hear
drops the newspaper and he looks and there's Bond.
Right, but he does have there's a good one-liner there that we forgot from earlier. Where he says, "Sorry, forgot to knock," before knocking him out with one hit while he's hanging upside down, where he can get no momentum behind his swing. That's pretty impressive.
You gotta love the James Bond single punch knockout that he does a lot.
Right.
In these movies.
Just after one hit, the guy, he's out cold. Very impressive, especially because I'm pretty sure Bond was still hanging upside down. It was an awesome reveal, though. I do like how they did that with you don't see him when he bungee jumps, you don't see him when he's running, you don't see him sneaking through the vents, but you do see him when the guy pushes the newspaper down and he's just hanging right there like Spider-Man. Forgot to knock and then knocks him out.
Overall, I thought it was a good movie. I wouldn't say it was great.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was the best, but I thought it was pretty good.
So I've seen this movie more than any other Bond film. I mean, when I was younger, there was a time when I watched this probably on repeat. For like, I remember seeing it like a good 6 or 7 times because it went along with the video game. It was great. I could relate to it. It was the first Bond movie I think I have strong memories of. Watching it again, I kind of doesn't hold up in a lot of ways. I still like it. I still think it was a strong showing. But now that I've seen all of them, I don't know. There are just some areas where I'm not as fond of it as I used to be. I guess part of that is growing up, but yeah. I thought it was fine. It was a fine Bond movie.
A good introduction for Pierce Brosnan, and he's going to continue into his next film, 1997's Tomorrow Never Dies. $110 million budget on this one, made $333 at the box office. It's the only one of Pierce Brosnan's films to not open at number one because it opened the same day as Titanic, interestingly enough.
Wow.
It earned a Golden Globe nomination. And Matt, as you mentioned, GoldenEye was the James Bond film you had seen the most. Coming into this Up for Debate Presents, I had seen only 4 James Bond movies. One of them was Tomorrow Never Dies, which I owned on DVD years ago, and this is the one I had seen the most.
Oh.
And I enjoyed it on DVD, and after rewatching, it's been a couple years, after rewatching it, I still really like this one. It's not a perfect film. What drives me nuts about this film, and we'll get into the details, I think this one is really close to being an excellent James Bond film, and just a few bad decisions led it to be just a pretty good film. I don't know. What are your first inclinations on Tomorrow Never Dies?
I think I kind of have to disagree, and this might just be my own bias from coming in with all the watching GoldenEye as often as I had, but I didn't really like this one. I didn't really like a lot of the directional choices that they went with. I didn't like the villain plot, which I think we're going to disagree on.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't like the Bond girl. I didn't think that there was any real chemistry there. Although I did appreciate that she was, like, for a very rare occasion, she was truly Bond's equal. Like, she had the martial arts. She was a Chinese secret agent.
Wei Lin, yeah.
Wei Lin, right. But she didn't mesh with Bond. I think they forced the romance. Like, it seemed like the romance was just there because Bond has to romance the girl.
Strongly agree.
And like, that's it, period. Like, if there's a girl and she's helping Bond, he's got to try to get with her no matter what. But I didn't think that really needed to happen because I think Wei Lin just worked as Bond's equal, and that could have been that. Matter of fact, they could have broke new ground by being this the first time where Bond, like, doesn't try to get in his coworker's pants. And,
I 100% agree.
You know, and they could have just went around that. Instead, they tried to force this romance, this artificial chemistry between them that just wasn't there. Did you know, Shaun, fun fact, this film was supposed to be called Tomorrow Never Lies?
Yeah, I know the story, but
that is an absolutely true fact. I did some reading about it, and it was apparently a typo. It was a script typo.
It was a fax error.
Fax error, right. So it was supposed to be Tomorrow Never Lies, which was based on the name of the media outlet that is controlled by the main villain of this film, Carver.
Yep.
Tom Carver? Elliot
Carver.
Elliot Carver, yes.
Played by Jonathan Pryce.
Elliot Carver. He controls it's called like the Tomorrow Times or something? Or
I think it's just Tomorrow is the name of the paper.
Tomorrow, yeah. So Tomorrow Never Lies is supposed to be the name, implying, lying and media and stuff like that. But it was a fax error, changed it to Tomorrow Never Dies. They just decided to go with that. I actually like Tomorrow Never Lies better. I kind of wish they had kept that.
The biggest issue I have is that I would always, and still do, confuse Tomorrow Never Dies and Die Another Day. You can't have die in both. That's the issue I have.
Yeah, I guess it couldn't be Lie Another Day, right?
No, Die Another Day is a good one. I agree with you. I think Tomorrow Never Lies is a better title. But
Tomorrow Never Lies.
What are you going to do?
Although I guess that kind of becomes an issue because his thing is all about lying. Like, that's what the main thing is. But he probably said it at some point in the movie. Like, basically Elliot Carver. Correct me if I'm wrong here. He's pretty much Steve Jobs. If Steve Jobs were a cartoon villain who controls a media outlet.
Yeah, I think the best comparison for Elliot Carver is probably Rupert Murdoch.
Okay,
that's probably the closest. You could also do who was the famous newspaper publisher way back?
Oh,
Spanish, American War.
Pulitzer, and he fought with
The other
Hearst.
guy.
Hearst.
Yes.
William Randolph Hearst. Yeah.
Thank you. Those guys, obviously,
William
is
Randolph
kind of
Hearst. Yeah, yellow journalism
journalism
and all that. Yeah. hmm Yeah, but they already made a movie about that, Sean. It was called
Newsies.
Rosebud.
Oh,
No, it was called Citizen
it was
Kane.
called Newsies.
And Newsies.
Can we watch Newsies for the show? I like Newsies.
Maybe that could be your award for
great-
getting through all this.
I
We
don't
could
know how
watch
I'm ever gonna do
watch Newsies and The Producers.
Can't believe how many of these we've done. Now, I will say, Matt, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot to talk about in this movie. But I have to point out one of my things I hated the most about this movie.
Okay.
Terry Hatcher as Paris Carver. I think that has to, for my money, in the entirety of the James Bond franchise, the worst casting. I don't have a problem with Terry Hatcher in general. I think she is so bad for this role, it shocks me. You talk about Bond not having chemistry with a character. They have absolutely no chemistry in this movie. It's kind of upsetting.
Yeah, you're right.
And
I think
she
you're
grinds
100% right on that.
First of all, you don't need her in the movie because she has no chemistry with Bond. When she's killed, I don't buy that Bond is getting revenge for her because you never see that relationship particularly spark in any way.
So I actually wrote a solution to this problem.
Oh, great.
I thought it would have been better if Paris Carver was played by an actual former Bond girl.
Yeah.
Or not like that. Not even that she was played by that. She literally was a former Bond girl. The first thing that came to mind for me was Natalia.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if Natalia and Bond had separated, as you know, it usually happens with Bond girls in between films, and she marries Elliot Carver, and then Bond. We really do know that Bond has had a history with this girl because we saw it in GoldenEye, and we actually feel it then when she is abruptly killed. It actually does cause some shock and it causes us to be upset as an audience because we have something invested in this character.
100%.
We have nothing invested in Paris Carver.
We have negative
and like you
invested
said,
in her.
matter of fact, it's kind of a boon for us when she gets killed because she was annoying as hell. So it doesn't really matter. I think a lot of the newer Bonds or the Brosnan era Bonds, they bank on our emotions as human beings too much, and they just expect. 90s movies in general kind of have this problem. Where they kind of count. I think they just kind of count on 90s action movies, at least. They count on you as a human being to just care about anyone or anything, no matter what. But I think it's a lazy escape for writers because they don't have to actually write scenes or dialogue that make you care about a character. They instead just expect you to. Like, you're supposed to care about them because we said so. Like, because they're an important role, but it just doesn't work.
And I will say, by the way, that is a big problem I have with the Daniel Craig movies, which we'll get into. But you are expected to care about Daniel Craig and Daniel Craig's life a lot more in those movies than any other Bond movies, and I don't.
Well, I'm going to disagree. I think that they do a very good job of establishing the Daniel Craig Bond, especially Skyfall, with the Bond backstory. I actually really like that.
Right.
We'll talk about that, I guess,
next week.
when that train gets in. Yeah. But for this one, for where we are right now, I was actually kind of, a matter of fact, that scene was very cool with the assassin, and Bond, where Bond turns the tables on him and shocks him. And that line I like never forgot, where he says, "I'm just a professional doing my job." And then Bond says, "Me too." And he shoots him cold-blooded. Like, excellent. That's like the first cold-blooded Brosnan moment in a Bond.
Yeah.
So, we can talk about the villain plot now.
Yes, let's do it. Elliot Carver, Media Group.
Yeah.
He owns, as he says, radio, TV, newspapers, movies, books. He owns it all. He reaches 1 billion people and he's launching his satellite news network. And his bad guy plot in the film is essentially to start World War III, or at least attempt to. He's partnered with a Chinese general, whose name is, I don't remember. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Is it Zhao, or is Zhao the one from tomorrow? From
That's Die Another Day.
That's Die Another Day. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it was a big enough character for us to know his name. But what he's going to do is he's going to blow up the party leadership in China so that this general ends up in charge in China. I guess I got ahead of ourselves. He steals a GPS transcoder so he can take a British ship and move it into Chinese waters with the British ship not realizing it's in Chinese waters. That makes the Chinese angry, and it makes the British angry, and they're approaching conflict. Then Carver is going to launch missiles at the Chinese and the British from a stealth ship so they don't know it's coming from Carver. They're thinking they're blowing each other up. Boom, 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 bombs start going off. Then Carver blows up Beijing and the leadership there, so his general is in charge. And so he both gets 100-year broadcasting rights in China because his guy is in charge there now, and he becomes a world hero because, correct me if I'm wrong, he's going to negotiate the end to the fighting between the British and the Chinese. So he will be both an international hero and have broadcast rights in China. Did I kind of sum that up correctly?
I didn't get the whole national hero part from the movie, but you could be right on that. I kind of honed in on the exclusive media rights to China.
That was definitely the bigger part of the plan.
I thought this was a really stupid plot for a villain, Sean. Like nobody was gonna like catch on at all that all the shit is going down and this guy is profiting a lot from it. I guess they didn't really have internet watchdogs back then, but like nobody was gonna notice. I don't know. It seemed very low stakes. It's like, oh, I can sell 1 million copies of my newspaper to China.
Yeah, but at the same time, I would say it's... Well, first of all, I think I will admit it's an overcomplicated plan, right? Because he could have just blown up Beijing. Did not have to start the war.
That's all that he needed to do, yeah.
That was a little much. But, again, we talked about yellow journalism. If his goal is to sell more newspapers and get more eyes on his media network, starting a conflict between the British and the Chinese is a good way to do it. Do I think he overdid it? Agreed. As I write in my notes, they make a torpedo drill that not only cuts into the side of the ship, but actually can worm its way around the ship until it sinks, and then they steal a missile from the ship. Definitely an over-the-top plan that I'm 99% sure wouldn't work in reality. But I think the core bit of his plan, creating conflict to sell media, is a good plan. I just wouldn't have done it this way.
Yeah, it seemed extremely complicated with I don't know. With all the moving pieces, I guess, going into it. But I mean, it wasn't the worst. Definitely not the worst plan I've ever heard from a villain. It was pretty much you only live twice. I thought it was like with the villain's plan there was he's got the volcano. Why did I write you only live twice?
That was the one where they were stealing the spacecraft out of orbit.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, because the premise of that is he's trying to stir a war between the USSR and the USA. In this one, he's trying to stir a war between Britain and China. In The Spy Who Loved Me as well, with the whole two sides playing against each other. It's the two sides playing against each other thing. But the only twist now is that instead of it's a major world power and Spectre is behind it, it's this media mogul that's behind it.
What a 90s idea.
Yeah, it's very 90s.
Very 90s
it is.
Thing.
It is super 90s. This was a 90s ass 90s movie. This was like the 90s Bond.
Oh yeah,
for
sure.
Personified.
I will say that I want to talk about Elliot Carver for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Pryce portraying the role. What did you think of him as Elliot Carver and Elliot Carver as a character?
He certainly had the sinister Bond villain down. I thought he was a little one-dimensional of a villain. I didn't think that there was no depth to him. He was a Bond villain. I felt like he was a lot like uh for what I thought when I first watched the movie. I thought he was a lot like Spy Who Loved Me's villain. No, I'm sorry, A View to a Kill's villain. I thought he was a lot like
Yes, Christopher Walken.
thank you, Christopher Walken. I had Steve Buscemi in my head, and I know it wasn't Steve
Oh,
Buscemi.
that'd be a fun Bond villain.
It would be a fun Bond villain. Yeah, but no, yeah, Christopher Walken. He seemed a lot like him, but without that, he had a vicious side to him, but he was a little more reserved. Maybe toward the end, it came out a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought he was better later in the movie.
Yeah, like I wanted to see him gun down an entire room full of his henchmen in anger, like Walken's character did. Like I
Well,
wanted to see like a really ruthless, vicious side to him.
I mean, that Christopher Walken's character may be the most twisted villain of
Sanchez,
the series.
definitely. I would say Sanchez
Oh,
from
Sanchez,
License
okay.
to Kill.
Yeah, that's
He
fair.
is twisted. Yeah.
I would agree. Who do you think would win
I
in
mean,
a fight?
Sanchez. He cuts a guy's heart out.
Yeah, but Zoran is literally a genius. I mean, he could outsmart Sanchez.
No, that's true. Sanchez is very paranoid and insecure. That's his downfall.
But Zoran's too
You're right.
confident.
I think maybe in a fight, Zoran would win because he could probably outsmart him and end up probably. I think he would end up getting Sanchez to join him, and then he would kill him in betrayal. That's where I see that going.
We're radically off topic here.
Yeah.
No, I think Elliot Carver. I think he gets better later in the movie. Again, the issue I have with this is that I think the Elliot Carver character is so close to being good. Like, I don't think it would have taken much more to make it a really interesting villain. The issue I have is early in the film, he's a little bit whiny and bratty, which he gets better as the movie goes on, but at first he's like, why is this happening? What is happening? They also do this annoying thing where when they first introduce him to you in the movie, he's on his video wall talking with his editors from around the world, and he is so over the top where he's like, this will be the news here, and then there's that line where he says, tell the president that he better sign the Decommissioned Cable Act, or else I'll release that tape of him with the prostitute. And the guy goes, I'll have him sign it. And he goes, after he signs it, release the tape anyway. And I'm like, dude, whoa, okay, hang on, slow down. You don't need to be this over the top to prove you're a bad guy. We're preconditioned to know you're the bad guy. I just thought they made some bad decisions around him. I thought Jonathan Pryce does a good job. I just think it was a slight miss that really bummed me out because I love the general plot of this movie. I just feel like they were a little bit Terry Hatcher and how they portray Elliot, and I think there's just little bits and pieces that didn't work in this one.
Yeah, sure. There are some changes they could have made. This could have been a really good one. A really good Bond film.
Well, and that brings me to what I love most about this film and why it is my favorite and why I can watch it over and over and over again. I think, and I would love to know your opinion on this, Matt, I think this film, end to end, wire to wire, has the best and most consistent stunt work of any Bond film. I'm saying individual stunts in other films may be better, but I think all of the stunts in this film are excellent. The remote control car garage chase scene is awesome. The motorcycle chase through the streets and on the rooftops is awesome. What else is in this for stunts? I'm trying to remember.
When they slide down the building, when they escape from
down with the banner
headquarters, that was pretty cool.
They do the halo jump out of the aircraft. That's really cool.
The halo jump.
What else?
There are some really good stunts. Also, if you're talking about all characters, Wei Lin has the karate scenes where she's fighting people with karate.
Yeah, I think that whole scene where right after they separate and Bond comes in at the end after she beats everybody up, that's really great. The hand-to-hand stuff in this is really good. I think the stuff inside the stealth ship at the end, I think is all really interesting and shot really well. I really, really liked the stunt work in this film. And to me, that's what kind of raises it up above.
Yeah, I'm thinking Moonraker had some really good stunts too.
I agree.
If I remember, that was a very stunt heavy movie. But you're right. I mean, what they could do in this decade, I think they were only just starting to realize. I think they began with the camera work with GoldenEye. You had a lot of like the hand to hand fight at the final um, climactic scene in with the cradle in Cuba. You had some other really good stunts in that movie, but I think this is where they're trying to like hit their stride. They finally figured it, like just kind of got it figured out with this one. You're right. You bring up a point that I did not consider. There are some good stunts in Tomorrow Never Dies.
There's not a bad stunt. That's what I like about this. There's not a boring stunt. They're all great. I think part of that's the director, Roger Spottiswoode, who co-wrote 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy, directed Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's done Under Fire. He directed Shoot to Kill, Turner and Hooch. He's directed a lot of kind of action stuff in this time, so I think that's partly where it comes from. It's just really well directed.
Yeah. Something interesting that happens in this movie, Sean,
Yeah.
that kind of went overlooked. Bond loses his iconic firearm.
Yes.
He exchanges his classic, was it his PP7?
His PPK, his Walther PPK.
Oh, his Walter PPK for a PP7.
For a P99.
A P99. P99. Are you sure about that?
That's what Wikipedia says.
PP9. P9. Well, anyway, the gun that he acquires in this movie is the one that he will use basically for the duration of the Bond films.
The Brosnan films.
The Brosnan Bond films. Yeah, I mean the Craig was a reboot, so it kind of restarts, but yep. Yeah, the Brosnan Bond films. Interesting. So little fun tidbit there.
I do want to mention the theme song to this one, performed by, there were 12 submissions for songs to this movie from bands such as Pulp and Mark Almond. I don't know who these people are. The winning song was Sheryl Crow, who performed this one. Tomorrow Never Dies, the name of the song, Matt. I thought it was not great.
No, this was a bad song.
I don't know, but I don't know if I'd call it bad. I think there were songs we'll talk about tonight.
Yeah.
But it definitely wasn't good. This is not a good era of Bond songs.
No, there's this is kind of a weak. I think it's maybe a period of time where just the music didn't really mesh with the Bond feel, the Bond like vibe, and they were trying to reinvent the Bond, what the Bond feel was supposed to be at the same time.
Music was changing at the time too.
Right,
I mean, music was
changing
all over the map in the late 90s.
Yeah, all over the place. New Millennium was happening. They were trying
so many different genres, and
yeah. So I don't know. It certainly was not a good one. I didn't even really like the intro, to be honest. The intro scene. However, I really liked the pre-credit sequence. Thought it was a very underrated pre-credit sequence with the arms dealer.
The arms dealer. Yeah, that was good. I agree with you.
He infiltrates the arms dealer camp in like Kazakhstan
but again,
or something.
Good stunts, good explosions, the stuff with the plane.
I did like that. I liked how he takes the plane, and I like how they all presume him dead, but then he says something about he's like, well, shall we ask the president where he'd like the missile delivered? And It reminded me of Connery in a way. He had that like smooth, suave delivery that Connery would have given. Like I could see him in the cockpit of the plane, like giving that same statement. It was good. It was very good.
I agree.
Good intro.
A couple of very short notes before we move on. My kind of leftover notes here. I still find it weird when Bond quips to himself when he's alone. Like, it's fine when he quips when other people are there. It still upsets me when he's talking to nobody, but he still quips.
It's yeah, it's very it's very much like oh, is that like if the camera wasn't on him, would that just be something he said in his head, like to himself, or
Is he just
or
talking to
what?
himself? Because is he like cracking himself up? I don't get
Yeah.
it. It's very weird to me. I also love that when Paris Carver is killed in the hotel room, they do that awesome movie gimmick where they pre-record the news saying the character has been killed.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Bond walks in, then it's playing on the TV the news report that James Bond has been killed, which to me is insane because, first of all, very overconfident of you to pre-shoot that. Number two, kind of hard to keep a secret you're murdering a guy when the news is like, wait, what script am I reading? Who's James Bond? Why did he die? Wait, what do you mean this murder is tomorrow and it hasn't happened yet? That is a weird one to me. And I like when movies do that because it's very silly.
It's just another instance of like, how the hell do you like when people said on the news like James Bond has been killed, their reaction should be, who is James Bond? Not, oh no, not James Bond. But I guess that's another instance of him being a terrible secret agent, or just the universe, I guess.
I guess he just doesn't give a shit.
Being right, just at this point, sure. I mean, there's been newspaper articles about him being dead. There's been people referencing his death, and he's supposed to be a secret agent, and nobody knows who he is. But worst kept secret. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if they had made another Brosnan movie. If he's out in like a city walking around, and oh look, there's James Bond. Oh, let's get his picture. Like they all like swarm around him, and he like loses the guy he's trailing or something because of it. Because it had become so self-referential at that point.
That would be a good like social media joke in a movie where it's like Bond is big on Instagram.
Yeah.
He's got a fan club. Matt, that was Tomorrow Never Dies. We've got to continue on. We're halfway through. We got another Bond movie here. 1999's The World Is Not Enough, the 19th James Bond film. Pierce Brosnan is back, baby. And this one was released in November of 1999. Made $362 million at the box office. A relatively successful film there. Matt, how do we feel about The World Is Not Enough?
So going in, this was another one of my favorite Bond movies from my childhood. This is the one that I was old enough to remember. I didn't see it in theaters because I was definitely too young when it came out, but I was 8 years old. But I do remember seeing it a few years later. It was not the first Bond movie I saw, but it was probably the most recent one. The first Bond movie I remember seeing in theaters was definitely Die Another Day. Mm-hmm. Definitely remember seeing that in theaters. World Is Not Enough was the most recent Bond movie to the date before I started watching them in theaters and being old enough to get an appreciation. So this was still like an introductory Bond for me. I really liked it then, and to me, I think it actually held up fairly well. I really like this movie. I like the villain's plot. I like the Bond girls. This is where I think we're gonna run into controversy, because I think that James Bond and Christmas Jones have a lot of chemistry, a lot more chemistry than any other Brosnan matching in a Bond movie. What is that? Who's the actress that plays her there?
Oh, that'd be Denise Richards.
Denise Richards. I thought a lot of people really criticize her acting in this. Got a lot
of jokes out of this one.
I really don't think so. I thought she was fine. I don't know. Maybe it was because I was so young when I saw it. I thought she was fine. I thought Elektra King was fantastic. She kind of stole the show in a lot of ways, but I think they were both fine. I liked this movie a lot. I have fond memories of this one. What did you think?
Matt, we haven't played it yet tonight, so we're going to play a little game. What does Matt think Shaun felt about this movie? What do you think I felt about this movie?
Shaun, I already
don't let
know
that
how
tip you one way or the other,
movie.
but I'm just curious.
Shaun probably thought that this movie was boring, that there was not enough going on, and that Denise Richards was a horrible actress in this movie, and she did a bad job.
You were pretty accurate up to the last point.
You thought Denise Richards did a good job?
I think she did a good enough job.
Okay.
She was not bad. There have been far worse Bond girls.
But you thought that there wasn't enough going on in this
Matt,
movie.
I wrote about 10 bullet points, and I think about 7 or 8 of them are negative. I wrote, my notes include the following terms: very dumb, a shame, not even remotely interesting, does nothing.
Did you say a shame?
Yeah. I'm just picking random words here. Don't care for. I generally, it wasn't a bad film, but I feel like this movie made a lot of weird choices and a lot of mistakes. And I agree with your overall point that this movie is too low stakes for a Bond movie. I'm generally not it's for me, if you're going to do a low stakes Bond film, I think For Your Eyes Only is a good example. If you do it, you have to keep it interesting and high stakes within the low stakes, if you know what I mean. This movie, the biggest mistake it makes in my eyes, and this is where we're definitely going to disagree, it relies too heavy on Elektra, who I did not care for. I don't think the actress was good. I don't think she sold the twist. I don't think she of all the Bond girls, Christmas Jones was more interesting than Elektra King. She was boring in this movie. I write here, this is literally a direct quote from my notes. I do like the Elektra is bad bit, but it's a shame they wasted it in this movie. Because I do like the idea of Bond falls in love with this girl, is protecting her, turns out she's bad the whole time. Love the idea. Don't love this actress in this role. I don't like the role.
I completely disagree with you. I thought she did a phenomenal job.
She has no personality.
I thought she was great. I thought she had a lot of personality. I thought she was excellent as the very first Bond, the very first female Bond villain, I will say. In From Russia with Love, you had, what was her name? Ava.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Ava something. She was a Bond villain. What I meant is like the very first head lead Bond villain. Like it's revealed that she is pulling the strings. Like she's the one in charge. She's the one doing all the stuff.
That's fair.
She is the first time that ever happens. And I think she's awesome. I think she does a great job.
No.
I was totally sold by her acting. I thought it was different. It wasn't like there was no quirkiness or zaniness like you were used to with the like campy Bond films. It's very straightforward. This is it's a very serious Bond film. Like it's probably the least jokey of the ones we've talked about. The Brosnan ones really didn't have a lot of jokes.
I think Die Another Day is very quippy.
Serious. Yeah, but in like a stupid way, like in a not funny, like in a kind of mildly annoying way.
Oh, not mildly. Yeah, a definitely annoying.
Just straight up annoying, especially the way that the movie starts. But I really like this movie. It's the last Bond movie right before the new millennium. Okay, made in 1999.
True.
It's the longest pre-title sequence of a Bond film. It racks in just a little bit over 15 minutes. The whole chase scene
but even that's like such a mild stunt.
Where he jumps off the hot air balloon and onto the Millennium Dome. Millennium Dome, get it, Sean? Millennium.
Yeah, I know. I got that.
It's
in London, which isn't very exciting. On the Thames, not very exciting. It's just a boat chase. Like, there's barely any obstacles for him to go through, except when the boat slides across land, which is weird. I mean, it's fine, but all the stunts in this movie were when they're in the tunnel, when they're in the pipe defusing the bomb. It's like, okay, sure. Like, it's not visually interesting to look at because they're just in a tube. I think the biggest issue I have with Elektra is that when she goes from good to bad, her character doesn't change at all. Like you don't sell to me that what I would have liked is when she's with Bond at the beginning of the movie, she's kind of like, oh, Bond, thank you. Oh, you're great. All this. And then when she becomes bad, she gets more serious and her personality changes, and it doesn't. She's just flat the whole movie.
Yeah. I thought I completely disagree.
Okay,
I think that I think that she totally sells the twist. I think that I think that the whole kidnapping part is ingenious. Using the money as a weapon is genius. The lapel pin is a weapon.
God, it's
It's
so
poetic.
convoluted.
It's not. It's a little convoluted, but it's
You were
it's
just giving crap to Elliot Carver's
it's also
overdone
poignant.
plan.
It's not. Yeah, but the result, like her result, is she's sabotaging the rival pipeline so that she can be the
No,
only one.
the overarching plan is good, but then you're like, well, but then you have to steal a nuclear weapon, but you're only going to use half the nuclear fuel in the bomb in the pipeline, so they think all the bomb's been used, but then you're keeping the other half, and then you somehow got a submarine
Yeah.
that, but then you're not going to blow up the submarine, you're just going to put the nuclear rod in, which will melt it down, and it's like, I'm like, what?
It does get a little confusing. It is a little convoluted, but it's a Bond movie. Like I don't really know where they get the submarine from. That's true. Also, Renard has a lot of access to Renard being the like basically Elektra's partner in crime, we find
Yeah.
out.
Can we talk about Renard?
Yeah, he's an interesting one too. He's got a lot of access to a lot of things that
Weak.
you wonder how he gets access to. I didn't really care for the actor, the guy who played Renard.
Robert Carlyle, who wasn't great. I would say the issue I had is that his whole gimmick was that he had been shot in the head, the bullet is still lodged in his brain, and it means he's impervious to pain.
Yeah.
Which he never uses for anything interesting in the movie. Like, at one point, he picks up a hot rock. Ooh, okay, ooh, neat. And he punches a table. Like, at no point do you see him, like, do something that causes a lot of pain in the act of stopping Bond or getting involved in the plot of the movie. Like, that had nothing to do with the movie.
No,
So
absolutely.
then why
not.
have it? Oh, drove me nuts.
It was. I think what they were trying to do was, in Bond villain fashion, the villain's got to have some kind of quirk, some kind of like,
But they don't always. I don't think that's fair, because you look at Stamper in Tomorrow Never Dies, and he's just a big buff dude who works for Carver.
Well, yeah, but he's not. Yeah, he's boring though, and he's forgettable. They were trying to make him a memorable villain.
But what I'm saying is
The whole like I can't feel pain thing. The thing is that they never use that like at all.
But wouldn't it have been more interesting if Renard didn't have that, and you're like, oh, he's just a boring regular terrorist, and you're like, oh wait, the much more interesting Elektra King is actually behind it, and you're like, okay, that's
okay. Then they probably could have taken that whole bit with the bullet in his head thing out and made him a little. I guess they were trying to. The only thing is, I was happy with keeping the bullet in the head thing. Just do more with that.
Oh, I agree.
Have a
make it
scene
part of the
where
plot.
where Bond tries to kill him by like setting him on fire or something.
Yeah,
but he
like
can't
shoots
feel
him
any
8
pain.
times, but he still keeps coming.
Right, but it never gets touched on except for the part where he's in bed with Elektra and he like punches the vase and he's like, I don't feel that at all, and we just take his word for it. Or when he's holding the hot coal in his hand,
Really,
he's like, I
the only
feel
part of the plot you need that for is the end, where someone has to stay on the soon-to-explode submarine and put the nuclear rod in, and because he's going to die anyway, he volunteers to do it. That's really the only way it plays into the plot.
Yeah.
Let's see. I've got more negative comments if you want to hear them.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's hear it.
Things don't even get remotely interesting until an hour and 20 minutes into the film.
That's not true.
That's
the whole
so
boat
true.
scene. That whole boat chase scene was
Very
great.
very mild.
Excellent scene.
I wrote
that boat was
direct,
very good.
Direct quote: "That boat chase is very dumb." Because it wasn't exciting. It was just two boats chasing each other.
Yeah, but the boat was cool, and it was on the Thames River, right outside. Like, that's the whole thing with Bond, is like they go to all these exotic locations, but this one's like right in his backyard.
It's boring. I will say it was,
because it was the last movie before the millennium.
I thought
and
it
they
was
wanted to
shot
end it in
well.
England.
But then, like, the hot air balloon, like, why?
She's trying to escape in the hot air balloon.
That's bunk. It was.
And then he says, "I can protect you," and he goes, "Not from him," and she blows the thing up. That was cool.
It was
You didn't
not.
think that was cool?
I did not think that was cool. Let's see what else is on here. Don't care for the Bond's hurt arm runner. Throughout the whole movie, they keep referencing how Bond's shoulder hurts.
Yeah, because he broke it. He hurt it on the Millennium Dome.
I know, but what I'm saying is, again, why? Why are they putting these things in this movie? It's bizarre to me because I'm like, someone at some point was like, you know what would be great? If we can keep calling back how Bond is old and weak, people will really like that.
They don't. It's like they don't really do enough with the things that they start. Like they started some good things, but why didn't they explore it more? Right, like the injury with Bond. Like where is that going? Where does that? What path does that take? His arm is injured. Okay, well, how does that limit him? We never see it really limit him, except for the part where Renard like pushes on it. Right. Yeah. Where does Renard as a villain go where he can't feel pain? Where's the path that leads from there? Yeah, they didn't really flesh out these ideas well. I'll give you that.
And then pivot over to Denise Richards, Christmas Jones, who doesn't really do anything of value in the movie. Now
she knows all the science, the nuclear science,
but she doesn't use it. She barely uses it.
She uses it when they're in the sub at the end.
I feel like genuinely, if she weren't in the film, the plot would have ended the same.
Because Bond just would have figured it out.
Yes, we've seen him defuse bombs before.
Yeah, but
we've seen him do. Believe me, he's been to outer space for God's sakes.
That's true.
What do you need Christmas Jones for? Now, I will say, Matt, and I'm going to agree with you. I think Denise Richards gets too much crap for this movie. I don't think she's bad in it.
Yeah.
I think the character lets her down a bit. I think they're far worse Bond girls. Good Night is way worse than Christmas Jones will ever be. And this joke of like Denise Richards is stupid, but she's playing a nuclear physicist, and you're like, that's really unfair. And I think I think with a better written script, she could have really shined in this movie. I think the film let her down more than she let it down.
Yeah, that's my hot take from this too. Since we're definitely gonna disagree about Elektra. I thought that actress was phenomenal, but yeah, at least we could agree on Denise Richards. I thought she was great in this movie. She wasn't like mind blowing, like amazing, but she definitely doesn't deserve the criticism that a lot of people give her. There have been way worse Bond villains or Bond females than her. I think that there was the problem where the movie really tried to be more than itself. Like it tried to be more Bond. I felt like it tried to do a lot of callbacks, which is a bigger problem I have with Die Another Day. And a lot of the callbacks didn't work. Like it was like, oh, we got to have a ski scene because people really used to like when Bond used to ski.
Even that was such a boring stunt because it's like they're just the paraglider guys and their little things, and then they dispose of them in like 2 minutes.
I'm not sure I understand.
Stop that watch. Why are you talking?
What was that?
My watch is listening. Even that was like such a bland stunt.
I thought that was Denise Richards. Yeah, it was. All right, so but I like the aftermath, right? When they get into that giant like foam thing, and Elektra's like freaking out. Like she's legitimately freaking out. You don't think she's selling it right there? That like she's genuinely afraid of getting recaptured? That like there isn't some kind of like, and the beauty of it is that when the twist is first kind of revealed, they suspect it's Stockholm syndrome. Like they suspect that she spent so much time under duress in captivity that she snapped and is like carrying out Renard's bidding. But how perfect is it that she orchestrated it all from the beginning? Awesome.
Here's the thing, Matt, and this is
awesome
I go back to my note. It's a good idea. They wasted it in this movie because, first of all, that Stockholm syndrome, the first time the movie points, if you haven't already figured it out, the first time it blatantly points out to the viewer that she may be the bad guy is an hour and 20 minutes into the movie. You're way more than halfway through this thing before they point it out, which I think is way too long to wait. And I will also say again, as I was watching the movie, I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't understand it. Like, they don't sell enough to me that Elektra truly is crazy and out there enough to pull off a plan like this.
Yeah, you think she's a little too subdued?
Again, this is a James Bond movie, okay? I expect my villains to have some flair. And
not even toward the end, though, like when she has him in the chair. I thought she did that scene particularly well.
I did note one of the few compliments I said in my notes. I thought the chair torture sequence was really good. I thought that whole scene, I thought it was shot really good, acted. I did like that scene a lot, but I wanted more of that because, again, that's one of the last scenes in the movie. Like, you got to give me more. When she's at the first half of the movie, when she's, like, good and we don't know yet she's the bad guy, sell it more. Be more interesting. Be sexier with James Bond. Be more out there. Even when she's gambling away the $1 million, which is part of her plan, but we don't know that yet, right? We think she's just gambling it. She does it so boringly and nonchalantly. You're like, how am I supposed to get excited for this character? I feel like I'm ranting a little bit at this point.
Do you think this was a failure of the writing, though, a little bit? Or the actor? I just thought she was a good actress for the role. But
this is one of those, because usually I feel pretty confident knowing which is which. I really don't know in this case if it's the acting or the writing. It might be a little bit of both. But the only issue is this particular actress, Sophie Marceau, has she been in, I'm looking now if she's been in other things I would know. She doesn't look familiar to me. Yeah, no, she's I think a French actress. She really hasn't been in... been in too many sort of big films that we would have heard of. But maybe.
Well, in all of this hubbub, we did forget a very sad bit of trivia surrounding this movie is that this was the last movie to star Desmond Llewellyn as Q, as our beloved head of Q branch. I guess the arrangement was for this to be his last one. They do send him. They give him a send off and everything.
Well, and they set up John Cleese, obviously.
And they set up John Cleese to be his replacement, who Pierce Brosnan lovingly calls R. But the actor Desmond Llewellyn passed away. He died in a car accident in December of the same year of 1999. What was your favorite Q moment through all the Bond movies? You had to pick one really good Q moment. What would it be?
Matt, that's a really good question. I think, by the way, starred in 21 of 24 films over a span of 36 years. I would say
he was the only consistent actor, right? Because they replaced M. They replaced Bond.
Everybody. I think he has to be the one.
They replaced Moneypenny. He was the only consistent one that was like holding them all together.
I don't even think Albert Broccoli was involved in as many films as he was.
No, he was. Yeah, he was in all of them.
I think
way back since Dr. No.
It's hard for me to say a favorite, but one that does come to mind is I really enjoyed in License to Kill. Maybe I'm just remembering it because it was more recent, but that was, I think, the only time they really pull him out into the field. And is used as part of Bond's plot. They dress him up in little outfits, and he's undercover, and he's kind of getting involved in some of the action. And I think it was a nice turn to see that after having seeing him in the lab over so many years. I did enjoy that. What comes to mind for you?
First thing that I always think of is obviously in GoldenEye when he's got the cast. And he's like, "Oh, sorry about the leg, Q, skiing," and then he shoots like a missile out of it, and he goes hunting. That's a pretty cool Q scene. I also really like the one that's also from GoldenEye, where Bond's like going through the lab. I think it's GoldenEye, where he's looking through like all the gadgets and stuff, and he picks up a sandwich, and Q goes, "Don't touch that. That's my lunch." Like he looks at it like he thinks it's a neat gadget, but it's just a sandwich. That was kind of cool. From the older episodes, I think the obviously the little Nelly, right? The little helicopter that he's got in You Only Live Twice. That was a cool moment. The Aston Martin with the ejector seat. I never joke about my work. 007 is a classic line. And finally, probably one of my personal favorites is when he appears as that priest in For Your Eyes Only. Where Bond is
Yeah.
climbing up the mountain and he goes into the confessional and Q is there. Oh, and one more. License to Kill. You know, your uncle is here. Your
Yep.
uncle's here to see you, and he flips him over, but it's Q. Great. Probably the best Q entrance in the franchise. So, yeah, a lot of great Q moments.
Yeah, well, and he leaves this movie and the franchise with the interaction. You know, I've always tried to teach you two things. First, never let them see you bleed, and Bond says in the second, and he says always have an escape plan, and he
goes
disappears
down
out of
the
view.
Trapdoor. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Yeah, yeah. So then, what do you think of John Cleese as his replacement? R.
I think you could do a lot worse. I mean, I you know, obviously it's God. I can't imagine what it's like to replace such an iconic role, an actor in an iconic role like that. I think he does a pretty good job. I certainly think he's better than the guy in the later Daniel Craig movies. That little nerdy guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's awful.
Didn't really care for him. We'll get there when we talk about those movies, but I have some ideas of a couple of people who I think would have done a better job.
Oh, hey, go for it.
Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch was my first
he's
go-to.
Too much of a leading man.
Yeah, he was a lot more. I think he was a lot less famous when Casino Royale was out. He wasn't doing as much stuff. I think he could have taken on that role and been fine. I could have. What was the guy that played the Hobbit? Or he played. He played Bilbo Baggins in the Hobbit.
Yeah. Oh, shoot.
Arthur Smith.
No.
Oh.
Arthur Smith. It's definitely not Arthur Smith. It's Oh no, I'm gonna Google this. I'm really mad.
He was also in the British Office. That was where he got his start. He played Tim in the UK Office.
I'm very annoyed that I don't know the answer to this.
I can see his face. I could. I'm gonna Martin Freeman.
Yes,
Martin Freeman. Yeah.
Who plays an agent in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
Is very good at that.
The Shield. Yeah, Agents of Shield. He would have been great. I thought he would have been a great Q for Craig's Bond. He would have done a fine job. I basically just picked the Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but
who's the guy who plays the gadgets guy in the Mission Impossible movies? The latest Mission Impossible movies.
I didn't see the latest Mission Impossible. Not familiar.
Simon Pegg.
Oh, Simon Pegg would have been good.
Or I would have like a Jermaine Clement would have been good.
What about the guy from the IT crowd?
I was thinking the same thing.
Either of them would have been good.
Any of those sort of stereotypical.
Yeah.
I think the issue with the guy they have now is he's just not funny enough. You need a little humor out of your tech guy.
He's a little weird.
Chris O'Dowd,
like a quirky, weird guy. Yeah, Chris O'Dowd. Yeah, he would have been. They would have been good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have a little bit of humor. I don't think any of them would play it quite like Desmond Llewellyn did, but John Cleese, I think he was a fine replacement.
I agree.
The thing I liked about him is he didn't try to be Q. He played it like it was a Monty Python sketch, and I think that was perfect. I think that was like exactly what the role needed. So
it was great. I agree.
Yeah, he did fine.
Let's see. As we start
wrapping
up,
all to say, yeah.
I got to talk about the theme. I always talk about the theme songs. Got to talk about the theme song. Again, one of my notes I just wrote theme song by Garbage.
Oh, I was about to make a joke about that.
Oh, please,
Sean, I thought that this theme was garbage.
Yeah,
I actually really liked the theme.
The World's Not Enough performed by Garbage. I thought it was good.
I thought it was pretty good. This is one of the ones that maybe not the ones that I would have downloaded to my iPod, although this is a little bit before the iPod era, but I thought it was a fine theme song. At least it would seem more Bondy than the previous two.
True. I agree with that.
Like a little more James Bond of a theme.
I think the issue I had with it is that it didn't really have a hook.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and all the really good Bond theme songs I can think of have some sort of chorus that's really memorable. Goldfinger, you know, something you can point to and is stuck in your head. And for this, it just kind of all blends together. But I agree with you; it's a pretty good song. Don't know why Garbage is performing it, but
Performed by Garbage. Yeah, I like the I did like the oil, like I mentioned before. I like the oil dripping, and that was because it's a very theme in the
I
movie.
thought it looked
The
gross.
oil makes up the world. Like it was very poignant for the time, and it was very, very poignant for the movie, for the themes that they explore in the movie as well.
I
So I like
think
that.
all of the CGI openings of the Brosnan era are, in general, not great. I'll say GoldenEye is probably the best in my opinion, but I think, especially like Die Another Day is terrible. And The World's Not Enough, I didn't really care for. I think they're just hard to watch, and I just think they're unpleasant to look at. I'm going to take a strong stance on this one. I don't think they're great. And maybe it's just because I really love the practical effects of the old ones. And actually, and you know what's fair? I think Casino Royale has a really good opening graphic. So I don't think it's just CGI that's the problem. I think these just, again, it's that era, and we will definitely talk about this in Die Another Day, where the CGI is just not good. And I just don't think it looks particularly great.
Yeah, it was a work in progress for sure. It was like a trial run, I thought.
I mean, I see what they were doing, but it was like,
yeah.
Okay.
The title of this movie I usually go through in the beginning, but just a quick, and then we can move on. The title of the movie is revealed in On Her Majesty's Secret Service to be Bond's family motto: "The world is not enough," or "Orbis non sufficit."
Oh, great Latin.
It comes up on a like a crest, like a family crest, and he also references it as a family motto in the final scene with Elektra.
Well, you know, Matt,
another nice little callback to this one is Elektra asks Bond if he knows what it's like to lose someone he loves, to which Bond like kind of shrugs it off and changes the subject. I thought it was an interesting callback to previous films, you know, with even though they didn't really earn it with Paris, Paris Carver, thank you, from the previous movie, and though they did earn it with, you know, Bond's first wife, Tracy, from On Her Majesty's.
I thought they were going to make a more blatant reference to Tracy.
That's the thing, is I thought I
seemed like a good place for it.
It seemed like a good place to just be more direct, and it's not like they haven't referenced her in previous films.
Oh, sure.
It was just kind of weird. Yeah, they tried. It's like they tried to do something, but they didn't go far enough, and that's pretty much the theme, I guess, with this one. So, this was Brosnan's number 3, and a lot of we've said in the past that the number 3 for Connery and the number 3 for Moore were kind of where he hits his stride, and he kind of, you think he's like at his most confident. You know, for Connery it was Thunderball, for Moore it was Spy Who Loved Me. Do you think that this is true of Brosnan as well? Has he hit his personal stride as Bond?
That's you're on fire, Matt. That's a really good question. I think when it comes to Pierce Brosnan, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say he might be the most consistent Bond. Because I think he's pretty good in all 4 of these movies. I think the different movies have different problems. I don't think Pierce Brosnan is ever the issue in any of these movies. I think the dude is solid. He's for me, just as good as GoldenEye as he is in Die Another Day.
Yeah, I think he brings back a lot of the sophistication that really only Connery had, like that suave. I mean, Moore had it too, I guess. Connery and Moore, like just the suave, smooth. Like I thought Dalton was a much more vengeful, like violent Bond. Like,
oh sure,
you wouldn't want to get in a fight with this Bond. Like you would genuinely believe this guy could kill somebody. Mm-hmm. You know. Lazenby was more of a
romantic,
romantic, heartfelt Bond, bleeding heart Bond, I guess. And Moore was more jokey and jovial. But I thought I think Brosnan and Connery have more in common than any other Bonds do, in my opinion. I think that they just have that suaveness. It was almost like watching Connery's protege.
Yeah.
On portray an updated.
Well, yeah, it's
Bond.
The Connery for A New Millennium.
Exactly. So, I think that's kind of what Brosnan's legacy will be
I mean,
with this role.
I think in general, you will find it very hard to get me to say anything bad about Pierce Brosnan. I
Yeah.
really have almost no complaints about his portrayal as Bond.
Mm-hmm.
I think he gets a little too quippy, but again, that's kind of more of a script problem than a Pierce Brosnan problem. And that certainly is the case in our final Brosnan movie. He signs a 4-picture deal. Here's his fourth, Die Another Day, released in November of 2002. Went on to make $435 million at the box office. We're going to Korea this time, Matt. And hoo boy, this film is out there.
Oh, yeah. This is the one that I'm gonna have a hard time saying anything good about.
This is one
Unfortunately.
of those movies where I don't think it's good or bad. I just think it's a movie. Like, there's so much going on, and the plot holes are so gaping. When I was watching this, I was thinking, like, how did they come up with this idea? And my only guess is that early in the script process, they had a writer's room where they were pitching ideas, and they put all these little note cards on the wall with potential ideas. DNA, changing DNA, North Korea, space beam, ice palace, and the invisible car. And they just had 100 ideas, and then a guy ran in, guys, we need a script tomorrow. Just use all of them.
Just throw them all in there.
It was so scattershot with what was going on. It was like every 5 minutes something else was happening. It was so zany, but I don't know if that's good or bad.
Yeah.
You sound like you didn't like it.
I have to say I really did not like this. I liked it even I didn't like it this was the first Bond movie I ever saw in theaters. And I remember not really particularly thinking much of it then. I don't think I really liked it now. There was a lot of weird choices here.
Yes.
And a plot that was really confusing and really hard to follow and really just kind of made my head hurt with all the talk about convoluted. You want to talk about a convoluted plot?
Oh, out of control.
There was a guy, North Korean general who I think wants to defect, but he has like a machine that can turn him into a different race.
Colonel Moon,
kind of genetic surgery. Yeah,
goes to a clinic in Cuba.
But it could also, he doesn't have to sleep and
yeah, then the plot. I have to start with this because it's been driving me nuts since I watched this. This is another Bond movie with a time jump because Bond is held by the North Koreans, later exchanged for Zhao. He is held. The on-screen graphic says 14 months later.
Right, 14 months, not 4 months. Yeah,
right, 14 months. But I want you to remember that because in that time, in those 14 months, Colonel Moon has undergone DNA changing, so he now has a different look. He's faked a diamond mine and become fabulously wealthy and then given half that wealth to charity. He's managed to design, build, and launch the Icarus satellite. He's gotten knighted by the Queen in 14 months, Matt. It's insane to me.
It's like I think the writers set aside all these accomplishments for him, but they also knew it would be unrealistic to have Bond be in captivity for the amount of time that it would actually take for this. Right, because then he would have to age, and he would also be really messed up in the head, which is a problem that I had in the movie. All right, he endures 14 months of torture.
Yeah.
And you know, there's this emotional exchange between him and M revokes his 00 status because she doesn't think he's going to be able to cut it. She says, like, you're on medical leave, and then after that, I expect you to basically pack up your things and leave and just go. It's like a heartbreaking scene. And then Bond escapes from the hospital because he goes into cardiac arrest because he's having all these nightmares.
Yeah, he literally stops his own heart. I have to point that out.
Yes,
he stops
it all turns out to
his
be a
own
ploy.
heart.
He stops his own heart so the nurses will rush in so they get the things off of him so he can escape the hospital. And then he goes to Cuba. He goes to a hotel, checks himself into a hotel, gets a shave and a haircut, and he's fine. He's fine, Sean. 14 years of torture meant nothing. He's just fine.
And honestly,
he's back. He's Bond.
It's such a missed opportunity because I will give a shout out. One of the things I actually liked that the Marvel Cinematic Universe did was they had this runner where Tony Stark has PTSD from what happened to him. And it added an interesting element to that character you don't see in big budget films. And I would have loved for that to have been a runner in this movie of how does he come back from something like that?
Right, because after that, not only is it never brought up again, but the movie goes from a very dark place to a very irreverent place very quickly. You know, everyone's making jokes, and all of a sudden it's more of a parody of Bond than an actual Bond movie. You got the laser satellite in there shooting at the ice palace. It's a mess. It's a mess. It culminates in what is probably the most laughable CGI moment in the Bond franchise when he surfs on the tsunami.
But the whole movie has bad CGI.
Air surfs on the tsunami.
That's the problem I have. It's not that wave is awful, but there's a lot. This is a really CGI heavy film for Bond, and it is almost none of it is good or watchable. It's horrific.
Yeah. A matter of fact, even Pierce Brosnan acknowledged it was a terrible movie. It was his least favorite film of the franchise. He disliked all the gadgetry and the overblown effects. Even when as far as suggesting to producers to go back to Bond's roots and make it darker. Kind of exploring. He thought that the torture scene was the way to go, but just explore that more. And I think that part of me wants to think that they held on to that because of Casino Royale. It does explore Bond's roots, and it is much darker. It just I guess there was the suggestion that Brosnan gave, but like 6 years too late or 5 years too late. I wrote in my notes, horrible tsunami surfing scene. In all caps.
But there were several really bad CGI moments. I know when I write in my notes something in all caps, it's an important piece of the movie, and I have written here in all caps, invisible car. Because it's like, at some point you have to, like, there's good gadgets, there's bad gadgets, and then there's laughable gadgets. And again, I can't figure out if it's a brilliant idea or a stupid idea. Because genuinely, I feel it's somewhere in between. I don't think it's a bad idea, but this movie is not only does it have a lot of plot holes, it has a lot of sci-fi gimmicks. Like, usually the tech within a Bond movie is unlikely, but I guess theoretically possible. But an invisible car is not a thing. Like, no. Space beam, not a thing. Like, even giant ice palace, sort of not a thing. So it's all of this stuff where it's like, stop DNA changing. It's like, stop throwing all this weird, impossible stuff at me. It feels like a movie out of reality, even more so than normal. It's
like a movie that didn't know it was a Bond movie, but simultaneously also was super aware it was a Bond movie. Like, if the only Bond movie you've ever seen was an extremely campy Roger Moore Bond movie, it's like if a computer saw that movie and wrote a script based on Octopussy, that would be what this movie would be like.
But that's what's crazy about it, is it oscillates so wildly, because I agree, there are for sure moments that are way over the top, but I also think they're really good traditional Bond movie moments. I think the sword fight between Bond and Gustav is really good. It's really well shot, and it's exciting, and it's tense.
So, interesting thing about that movie, or about that scene, is that apparently they filmed it in not slow motion, but the actors were telegraphing their moves very clearly, and they sped it up very quickly to make
you couldn't
it seem
tell.
and you couldn't tell, right? That's how they did it. So they were like, because neither of the stunt doubles, I think, were professionally trained in sword fighting, so they just like kind of telegraphed it, but then they sped it up to make it look like they knew what they were doing. So I agree. That was a very good scene. The fencing, the sword fighting scene. Yeah.
And I'll also say that when Colonel Moon is Gustav Graves, I think that's a really, the actor, Toby Stevens, who's playing him as the white guy, I think is really a compelling character. He plays insane really well in this, I think. And there's something about him where you're like, whether or not you know the twist is that he's really Colonel Moon, you're like, there's something really wrong with this guy. You know, I do like the performance of Gustav a lot in this movie. And I think in a better Bond movie, it could be really cool. It's a shame it's wasted in this one.
Yeah.
Because, again, good moments, bad moments. It's all over the map.
It is.
Matt, Madonna's in this movie.
Madonna, yeah, she is.
Who actually, if you
Madonna.
can believe it, she won a Razzie Award for Worst Supporting Actress in this movie. Which I'm gonna come out and say, I mean, she wasn't great, but she wasn't that bad in the movie.
She was.
She only
I think
had
she was
like
just mostly forgettable.
she only had 3 lines.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even remember. Was she in the Ice Palace? What scene was she?
No,
in?
she was the fencing instructor right before the sword fight.
Oh, right. Yes. Yep. She barely was in it.
She barely was
but
in
she
it.
did. She did get to sing the opening song.
Ooh, yeah, we can talk about that. Not great.
No, not a good song.
Not
Sean.
not even a good Madonna song.
Not a good Madonna song. Not a good Bond song.
Not a good song. Period.
The best thing I could say is that it really emphasized the torture that Bond was going through. Like it would be nice if the movie had like kept up with that and used it at all, because it would have. I think it really would have driven home. You know, Bond could be breaking psychologically, and he could be really affected and impacted. This could be a great moment to take Bond in a much darker direction, but no, it just gets glossed over and is for nothing. Basically,
Yeah,
it's just so that he
opening
has a
sequence.
place to go while Moon is doing all this stuff. Basically,
Yeah. Well, and you know, speaking of the theme song, as I was watching it, I'm like, why is this like Madonna made good songs at one point? Why is this song so bad? And I thought, oh shit, this was 2002 when culture was awful.
yeah.
Like 02 to 03 has the worst mix of movies, television, music. Matt, do you know what the number 1 song of the year was in 2002? I looked it up.
Was it "Will You Be My Hero" by Enrique Iglesias?
No, I think that
I
was
just remember that song being everywhere after 9/11.
that was
like,
actually the
main song.
22nd most popular single of 2002.
Okay.
Here are some other songs in the top 20. My Sacrifice by Creed, The Middle by Jimmy Eat World, Complicated by Avril Lavigne, Blurry by Puddle of Mud, In the End by Linkin Park, the number 1 song of 2002, How You Remind Me by Nickelback. Matt, it was not a great time for culture.
I actually was thinking, I was like, I wonder if it was something by Nickelback.
And also,
Not a great time
not
at
only
all.
was number 22 Hero by Enrique Iglesias, but number 25 was Hero by Chad Kroeger from the Spider-Man soundtrack. Here the hero can
That's
save
right,
us.
Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was out around that time. Perfect.
Yep.
Well, what a time to be alive.
Gross.
Was that around? Must have been around when the Xbox was coming out, like the original Xbox.
2002, 2003. There was nothing good happening at that point. Culture just did not know where to go. Five
No
for Fighting
way.
Superman was number 46.
Of course,
It's
yeah.
not easy. Anyway, I gotta.
Why
stop
didn't
looking at this
Five
list.
for Fighting should have done a Bond song?
Yeah, actually, because you know when 100 Years, you know, and some of their other what other Five for Fighting songs were there? Not many. Oh, the Riddle.
The Riddle, yes.
I think actually
about
they would have
it.
been
I think
good.
we named all of them.
Coldplay should have done one.
Coldplay would have done a very sedate job at a Bond theme,
Who
but
else would have
it would be all right. It'd be fine.
I gotta think about that.
Fun, a really fun Easter egg that I spotted in this one, Sean, in this movie. Probably the best. Wasn't definitely not enough to save the movie, but it was pretty cool. When he's in Cuba and he's talking with the guy that's the sleeper agent or the spa agent. They're in Cuba, and he picks up a book from the shelf. And what book does he picked up? He picked up Field Guide to the Birds of the West Indies by James Bond.
Oh, I missed that. Oh,
That's the book that Ian Fleming would always read. He kept by his nightstand, and he needed a name, like a plain name for his character in his spy novels. Instead of like Jimmy, it's going to be something like the Jimmy Spy or something. He finds it. James Bond is on the cover, puts him in the book.
I like
So
that.
it was a nice callback. I'm surprised that they didn't do it in an earlier movie, but this was like the anniversary. This was, what was it, the 50th year anniversary or something?
It
I
was
wanna
the
say?
20th movie.
It was, but it was like year wise.
Well, it was '02, and the first one came out in '62, so it would have been the 40th.
The 40th. So it was the 40th year anniversary of Bond. So
Yep,
that
Skyfall was
was
the
their
50th.
yeah. Skyfall was the fifth. So that was kind of like I guess a callback to. Wow, it's crazy that a whole decade separates those two, huh? Die Another Day and Skyfall.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's 4 years between this one and Casino Royale, and then they
Yep.
do every two. Well, no, and then there's another 4 years between Solace and Skyfall.
Hmm.
Die
What
Another
else is
Day.
there to say?
Well,
Yeah.
we can talk a little bit about the end of the movie. Skybeam from space. Gustav / Colonel Moon is going to use it to, I guess, destroy all the landmines between North and South Korea, so Korea can invade South Korea and can win the war. He kills his dad. There's a big fight. Well, first they have to escape the ice palace with the invisible car in a stunt sequence I would describe as hard to watch. When they're driving through the ice palace and stuff's melting, it is so confusing as to what's going on. There's so many cuts. There's water everywhere. I would argue that's hard to watch. They get on the plane. The plane somehow flies through the skybeam and still survives, which is very confusing to me. Again, very inconsistent movie. And eventually, Gustav / Colonel Moon gets sucked out of the plane and killed in the engine, Air Force One style.
Yeah. I don't know if they were trying to go with a like the Goldfinger when he gets sucked out of the window. Was that like a callback to that at all? I don't know. Not really.
Good question.
I guess.
I don't know.
I guess somebody falls out a window in The Living Daylights also.
Yeah, I think. Well, like I said, Air Force One was not far before this.
Yeah, they might have just watched Air Force One. Yeah, and that about does it for.
Yeah, I've got a few small notes. Why couldn't Zhao remove the diamonds from his face? I mean, does he just think it's cool to leave them there?
I guess it makes him very identifiable, though.
I mean, it's like, a cool look. I'm not gonna lie.
It is.
It actually kind of did for a bad guy look. You could do worse.
Yeah, it worked, but he goes through all the trouble with the spa treatments and the surgery and stuff. Why not just get those taken out?
But I can't think of a medical reason you couldn't.
This is where they could have made up some bullshit about how they're like embedded in his veins, and if they try to remove them, he bleed out or something. And we would have bought it. We would have been like, okay, we're not doctors. That sounds right. Whatever. But they don't even give a reason for it. So I guess he just thinks they look cool.
I also wrote, what does Icarus have to do with diamonds? I mean, I guess he had to get money somehow, but I feel like there's really like 4 bad guy plans he goes through in the span of this movie. First, he's illegally selling weapons to Bond at the beginning, and then he's into African blood diamonds, and then he's into space satellites, and that like it just keeps going.
It was a mess. Yeah, it was a mess. That
map.
goes back to your theory with the
they just threw everything at the wall.
Yeah, it was just a mess.
I like the robot arm laser scene where the lasers were shooting everywhere, and then one shoots through the back of the guy's head and out his mouth. I thought that was pretty neat.
That was pretty wild, yeah.
Matt, I just realized we somehow have gone through this whole movie and haven't mentioned arguably the biggest star in the movie. Even bigger than Pierce Brosnan.
Oh, Halle Berry.
How did we do that? We're very bad at our jobs. We were almost going to end
it without even mentioning Halle Berry. She was everywhere in the early 2000s. Remember her?
Now, interestingly enough, this is the first movie she did after winning the Oscar for Monsters Ball.
Yes.
It was after X-Men, right before X2.
She was arguably at the top of her career.
Oh, undoubted.
This don't before or after Catwoman?
Before.
Okay, so she was definitely at the
she had just won the
probably
Oscar
the peak
the year
of
before.
her career.
She
just won the Oscar for Monsters Ball. Yep. And she was flying high, and then it all was downhill from there.
I think she's
Bond.
good in this.
No, she's definitely not the problem with this movie.
I think
not even close.
But the script, I don't think does her justice.
She's fine.
Is part of the problem because she's not really given much of a personality. She just quips a lot.
Right. She's eye candy. Like we all know it.
But
everybody knows
but
it.
But she pulls it off.
Yeah,
Like I've seen
she's
crappier
she's fairly
eye
competent.
candy.
Like she does help. She contributes to the plot, not much, but she does help. But she's fine. She gets the sword fight with the woman and kills her with the sword, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. Like,
Yeah. No, she does the action stuff well. Now, Matt, interesting fun fact about her, and I don't know if you know this, Jinx was the character she played. MGM was working on a spin-off film in
yes, I've
2004,
read about
and
this.
the idea was that they would do a Winter Olympics-style alternative where one year they would release a Jinx film and one year they'd release a Bond film, and back and forth. They had also considered developing a spin-off based on Michelle Yeoh's Why Lynn character from Tomorrow Never Dies. Unfortunately, they pulled the plug on the project because they wanted to focus instead on Casino Royale and use several of the ideas from the spinoff in that movie. Matt, let me ask you, what do you think of the idea of either a Halle Berry Jinx-led spinoff or a Michelle Yeoh Wai Lin-led spinoff?
Well, let me start with the Wei Lin spinoff because that I hadn't heard of that one before. Think about what that would do on an international market.
Oh, these days,
like today,
but
these days, if they had the foresight, if they had just had the foresight, I think that would be huge. I think that China would love to see.
Oh, they'd be a gazillionaire. I mean, back in
Mhm.
02, well, I guess they would have been considering it in 97 when Tomorrow Never Dies comes out, but the China cinema was not like it back then what it is today.
It wasn't.
I mean, they would have been really ahead of the curve.
They would have been. And there was no way to. I guess there was no way to be smart about it.
But I thought Michelle Yeoh was very good. I think there was a chemistry problem with Bond, but I think her alone, I thought she was
watch
really
her.
good.
I would watch her on a standalone.
Yeah.
I absolutely would. I don't know about Jinx. I don't know if there was enough if the movie worked enough depth with that character necessarily, but I thought that that Wei Lin at least I probably would have seen the first couple of movies that came out of hers. Yeah.
I will say about Halle Berry though, I think she could do a good series of spin-off movies. I think the issue, I agree this movie doesn't give her much of a personality. I think that's what a spin-off movie could do. The issue I have is I don't know. I think she would have to be a more quippy, funnier agent. She'd
have to have her own personality. The movie pretty much I think just makes her eye candy.
But I don't think she could do a more serious agent. Like I don't think she could do a Bourne Identity Daniel Craig type Bond. I think she does need to be some humor involved, more of a Pierce Brosnan like Bond.
Yeah.
Spy agent to work. I think if that movie comes out, I think she's great in that. She's good. Have you ever actually seen Catwoman?
I actually haven't. No, I've never seen Catwoman.
It is a trash movie. Genuinely terrible. Right in that era of like Daredevil and some of those really bad superhero movies, Elektra and those. She gives it her all. She's not bad in the movie. Like, and that proves to me, like, if she can be good in that piece of crap, there's no reason to think she couldn't do a spy movie. So I think that's a shame because I would have really enjoyed watching that. She was in The Kingsman as well. She's done action before.
Yeah, she was.
You know, she can do stunt work. So I think that's a bummer. That was a missed opportunity. I would have really enjoyed seeing that.
Yeah, I think it's purely just the way that it was written, the way that she was written into the film.
Yep.
Gotta be. Yeah, it's a shame. This movie in general, it took a wide turn from something that could have been really, really an interesting way to explore Bond's character. Like you said, with the PTSD, the similar way that it changes Iron Man in the Avengers movies. This is where it could have changed or affected Bond. But instead, it gets simply brushed off as just, it's just in a day's work, and all we need is, just a haircut and a shave, and Bond's right back to normal. He's right back to sorts.
But that's this whole movie, right? Is you just take it and you tweak it slightly, and it's a million times better. Gustav Graves is the same way, right? If you kill the DNA changing I'm a Korean backstory, and you just make him an insane Icelandic man who can't sleep, that to me is really interesting. I think he could be really good in that.
And he could have some kind of connection with the North Koreans, like trying to get nukes from them. Maybe because Iceland is closer to the United States, and he reaches some kind of
Sure.
deal where, and they could like say, oh, we'll sneak it through the Arctic Ocean or like through the glaciers of ice, so that the Americans won't be able to trace it, and all of a sudden these nukes will show up in Iceland. Like that is very interesting. That's a really interesting plot to a movie.
Much more
You don't need
plausible.
all the other sci-fi crap, and
No.
much more plausible. Yeah, that would have been really. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go and write that movie right now, where
It would be
the
great.
North Koreans are trying to ship missiles across the Arctic Circle.
Well,
And Canada is there, but they don't want to get involved. And America doesn't know about it. That would be a great movie.
there's so many. All you have to do is give Jinx 5% more personality, and it would have been a better. Give Madonna 2 less lines. I mean, I just think there's so many ways you can improve this movie. It's a mess.
And then
But
they're afraid that if the nuke goes off in the Arctic Circle, it'll affect the polar ice cap. This totally sounds like a Bond movie.
But at the same time, Matt, I kind of liked it. Like, it's not a great movie. It's barely a good movie, but it's just crazy enough and interesting enough. Like, this is the kind of Bond movie I've only ever watched on cable and have seen little bits and pieces of, because it's that kind of movie. But I don't think it's bad. I just think it has problems, and it's good enough.
I think it's bad. I think it's a bad movie. I think it's
Here we go.
shittily written.
Here we go, Matt.
And
Now's
it's confusing.
We've talked for 2 hours on these 4 movies. Now's the time, Matt. Rank them. These 4. Pierce Brosnan. Rank them.
All right. I'm going off my personal favorite.
That's
I'm
fine.
not
That's
going
what we're
off
here
the
for.
ones that I think are the best. My personal favorite of the 4 that we talked about tonight still remains GoldenEye. So GoldenEye is number 1 favorite. After that, I'm going to have to put World Is Not Enough. So GoldenEye, World Is Not Enough, Tomorrow Never Dies, Die Another Day. My order of favorites. Tomorrow Never Dies just wasn't as memorable as the other ones. There's no iconic moments. To me, nothing really stands out, and I really didn't like the chemistry between Bond and Mei Lin. However, nothing pales in comparison to the train wreck that is Die Another Day. So that gets last billing for sure. You're right. To a certain extent, World Is Not Enough. It was good. I really liked it, and I thought that everybody did a phenomenal job on it. But there was just too much downtime, a little bit too much downtime, and the plot just didn't go far enough. So that's how I have to rank it. Okay.
We are going to radically disagree. I'm so excited. For me, there are 2 tiers, right? GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, good. World Is Not Enough, Die Another Day, not good. So I'm going to rank it number 1, Tomorrow Never Dies, because I think it's a slightly more complete film than GoldenEye, which is number 2. They're close, though. I think they're both good movies. But I'm going to put Tomorrow first, then GoldenEye, then... You're really not good. Then Die Another Day, then The World Is Not Enough.
We just shut this podcast off.
But I'm also
Like,
the guy
this
who
is
loved
ridiculous.
Moonraker. I love the zany, crazy,
man.
out of this world James Bond
You don't
stuff.
know-
Nothing interesting happens in The World Is Not Enough. I could have slept through that movie.
I think we've been at it too long. I think your brain is starting to melt like Bonds under the Korean torture.
Here, Matt, I will say that we've been, I would argue, pretty mild leading up to this point. I think we've temporarily lost. There you go. Are you back?
I am back.
Okay.
I don't know what was going on there.
What I will say, Matt, is I think up to this point, we've been relatively mild on some of these movies. And I'm going to warn the folks at home, next week is going to be a no-holds-barred, on-fire cage match to the death over Daniel Craig. I have aggressive opinions about Daniel Craig, and they are very different than yours. So
Looking
I'm
forward
kind of
to it.
excited. And I've seen Casino Royale and Skyfall, have not seen Quantum Inspector. So I think it will be very interesting. I super duper recommend people tune in for that next week. We're going to wrap up our big James Bond series. It'll be a lot of fun. As I mentioned, our website, upfordebate.tv, is a place you can go and get all the other episodes. You can also check us out anywhere you get podcasts and the video version on YouTube. And of course, you can reach out to us at upfordebatetv or email us upfordebatetv@gmail.com. If you think we're insane, please let us know. We probably are. Matt, any last thoughts on Pierce Brosnan or anything we've talked about this evening?
I forgot to mention that fun fact in Die Another Day, it's the last Bond film to use the gun barrel intro. And I didn't really know that until researching for the film. In all the Craig Bond films, they like circumvent it in like cute and interesting ways, as we'll see in Casino Royale next week. But the last one to use the traditional gun barrel intro.
Now, Matt, we are way over time. I'm going to very briefly mention this, but do you know what the lowest ranked Bond films on Rotten Tomatoes are?
The lowest rank Bond films.
With the lowest Rotten Tomatoes score.
I would have to say Die Another Day would be up there. World's Not Up's probably up there, but I don't care. I love it still. Very
quickly, the worst score is A View to a Kill, 36%.
Mm-hmm.
Then Octopussy, not surprising. Then Man with the Golden Gun.
Oh yeah, that's right. I do remember that got pretty bad reviews.
And then 3 Pierce Brosnans in a row. The World Is Not Enough. 51%. Tomorrow Never Dies. 57%. Die Another Day. Which, by the way, Die Another Day doing better than World Is Not Enough and Tomorrow Never Dies with 58%. And then to get to the other Pierce Brosnan GoldenEye, you have to go 78%. So much better.
Wow. I think that a lot of people remember the GoldenEye video game and look back on nostalgia with that. And I mean, not that I'm not saying it was a bad movie. I think it's still a really good movie. But I think that they give it a lot of credit because of that.
We've got to figure out a way to play that on the show.
Yeah. Something I was going to ask you during the show, but we just ran a little bit too long. And if you want to think about this and get back to me for next week. So I mentioned that Die Another Day was the last Bond film to use the gun barrel intro. And I wanted you, Sean Jennings, to invent your own gun barrel intro to a Bond movie. Like pretend that you're Bond and you would like have a gun barrel intro. What would you do? And how would you do it? Think about that.
Don't they all just spin and point a gun at the camera?
They do it in different ways. So remember, like Lazenby switches it up when he like goes down on one knee and fires.
I already know the answer.
Each one of them do like a slightly different variation.
I already know the answer.
I think Roger Moore has a hat. Yeah.
Don't even have to think about it. I know the answer. Do you want to know it?
Yeah. Let's hear it.
I would dab. I would dab. Got to update it for the kids, Matt.
So would you shoot first and then dab, or dab first and then shoot?
No, I'd shoot first and I dab because I shot the guy.
All right.
Like, boom, got him, sucker.
You do a floss. You'd start
yes.
Flossing and then shoot and then
yep.
floss some more.
Yep.
Do the little wave. The
start doing the Carlton.
The Fortnite dance. Yeah.
Yeah. Kids won't get. We got to appeal to a younger demographic.
That's right.
Oh boy, Matt,
we're
out of
flossing.
We got to get out of James Bond. This is killing us.
Yeah.
We got to shut it down here so the fine folks at home can finally turn off this show. Thanks everybody for joining us as always. Please do come back next week. I promise big fireworks for Daniel Craig, but until then, on behalf of Matt, I'm Shaun. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time for another chapter of Up for Debate Presents.